My name is Quinn and this is my presentation on the Communist Revolution in China. Imperialism is a policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force. In 1911, China was ruled by Emperor Puyi, the last emperor of the Qing dynasty. For the longest time, China had been a superpower in East Asia and had emperors and dynasties dating back thousands of years. Around this time, the Qing dynasty began to face external and internal threats. Externally, they faced threats like Western technology and other imperialist European and Asian countries with imperialist ambitions. Imperialist countries began to control areas around China, which gave them control of trade and military. Internally, China faced threats like population growth and rebellions that threatened the empire's power. Revolutionaries began to want freedom from foreign control and a government that better represented its people. The Wuchang Uprising, an armed rebellion in 1911, started the Xinhai Revolution that later led to the overthrow of the Qing dynasty and imperial rule in China. After the revolution, a new nationalist party formed the Republic of China and appointed their first president, Sun Zhongshan. The nationalists tried to rebuild, modernize, and unify the country, but the nationalists struggled to maintain power because many regions of China were ran by warlords. In 1921, socialist anti-imperialists formed the Communist Party of China, led by Mao Zedong. Both communist and nationalist parties briefly allied against warlords, but after Sun Zhongshan's death and the new appointment of nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalists allied with the warlords and landlords. This alliance led to harsh treatment of the peasants and poor. The communists began to encourage the peasants to overthrow the landlords and the nationalists. From 1927 to 1937, the communists tried to gain power, but the nationalists continued to suppress them. During this time, Japan began to invade Manchuria and northeast China. By 1937, China was at war with Japan, and the Second Sino-Japanese War began. The communists and nationalists briefly united to fight the common enemy, and many peace treaties between them were attempted, but none were successful because factions from both sides continued to fight. The U.S. became involved but later withdrew because their anti-communist policies made helping the situation unpopular. After Japan's defeat and surrender in World War II, the communists and nationalists continued to fight, and China remained divided. After years of a Chinese civil war between the nationalists and communists, the communists were able to take control in 1949, and the nationalists fled to Taiwan. The long history of peasant suffering helped make communism more appealing to the population. The Communist Revolution resulted in the death of millions, but under the rule of Mao Zedong, China improved in health and services, education, employment skills, and women's rights. The communists supported decolonization and socialist movements around the world by providing money and arms. For the U.S. at this time, Cold War efforts were partially about anti-communism, so after the Communist Revolution, China became a potential threat from the U.S.'s perspective because they were communist and because they aided countries the U.S. was against, such as North Korea. Following the Communist Revolution, Mao Zedong continued to change China, but some of his efforts resulted in death. For example, the Great Leap Forward, an effort to change China from a mostly agrarian society to an industrial society, created communes of farmers and brought them into industry. The Great Leap Forward also resulted in environmental damage because of the encouragement of families to create backyard steel furnaces and cut down trees because Mao wanted to no longer depend on foreign steel and machinery. Because Mao had pulled so many farmers into industry, when the crops came in, there was not enough people to harvest the food, and much of it was wasted. Farmers brought what was left of the food to the cities to please the leaders. However, there was so much food taken that the people left in the countryside began to starve. After the struggle of the first harvest, the following years continued to be hard. A flood of the Yellow River, the long-lasting drought, and the policies of the Great Leap Forward all contributed to the famine. The Great Leap Forward's plan was called off after only 3 years, and Mao Zedong lost power until 1966 when he called for the Cultural Revolution. According to History.com, Mao called to, quote, purge the country of representatives of the bourgeoisie who have sneaked into the party, the government, the army, and various spheres of culture, and destroy the four olds, old ideas, old customs, old culture, and old habits. As a result of this, many were jailed for crimes against the state. Young radicals formed a militarized group called the Red Guard and began destroying what they considered old culture, school, religion, artifacts. Mao published the Little Red Book, which he required people to read in order for, quote, re-education. Today, people in China are not allowed to talk about these events to protect Mao Zedong's legacy. Since Mao Zedong's death in 1976, China has remained a communist state, and the nationalists that fled to Taiwan have continued to control the area and the Republic of China.